Well, our economy is in an interesting spot still at this moment in time as we go into 2023. Hopeful, but there's a lot to work through still at this time in order to have a good result from 2023. And joining us once again as we begin this new year talking about the economy is Michael Greiner, assistant professor of management at Oakland University's School of Business Administration. Michael, thanks for being with us.
It's great to be back. Happy New Year, Tyler.
Happy New Year to you as well. Not so much of a Happy New Year for Tesla, currently having quite the struggle with on-demand worries and delivery issues as well. To take us into a little bit of details on what's going on with Tesla and why this particular company that has been having a strong last few years, it seems, is now in a position of a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting case to me. And frankly, the kind of thing I'll be talking about with my students going forward the next few years. Everybody's focused on Elon Musk and the whole Twitter acquisition and all the craziness going on around that. And we've talked about that here on this show. I think, though, there's a bigger story that's going on here, and one that is that you're seeing an industry in transition, where at one point, Tesla was what we call the first mover, and they had first mover advantage as a result of that. And they were really kind of for lack of a better way to put it, the only kid on the block when it came to EVs that had any kind of appeal to the general audience. And what's happening is we're starting to see this industry move to a more mass market appeal, where there is more growth in the sales of EVs, more competitors coming in. And as a result, Tesla's now starting to face more competition than it did initially. And kind of that initial shine that it had is wearing off. I mean, you have to remember, Tesla at one point was one of the most valuable companies in the world. It was more valuable than Toyota or General Motors, both companies that sell far, far more vehicles than Tesla ever has, and frankly, have also made much, much more profit than Tesla. Ironically, Tesla doesn't make a whole lot of profit per vehicle, and most of its profits actually are made by selling what are called carbon tax credits, where because of the fact that it saves so much money with its vehicles, it's able to sell the credits to other more polluting industries. And that's where it makes most of its money. But that being said, you can't deny the fact that Tesla has been a success story. I mean, they're selling hundreds of thousands of EVs, far more than any other single company out there. But that growth that they've been experiencing is definitely slowing down, and they're being kind of nipped at the heels by other competitors. Some of the strong competitors include Hyundai and their partner brand Kia, who've come out with a number of strong vehicles. And in the United States here, of course, you have Ford, who have moved into second place in terms of EV production, and GM, who really have prioritized EV production. Frankly, their top-selling EV right now, which is the Chevy Bolt, which was really one of the early vehicles to come out that was really fully an EV vehicle, has struggled over the past year because they had some problems with the batteries, and you could see this would be a big issue. They had to warn customers that the batteries were prone to catch on fire and that you shouldn't keep it in a garage as a result of it. That would be a pretty big disincentive for people to buy that vehicle. It seems, though, that GM has addressed that, and they're actually moving away from the technology that caused that problem in the first place. They've got a whole new battery technology. And as a result of that, the growth of their EV sales seems to be growing again. But now, the top 5 selling EVs in the United States, only 3 of them are Teslas. This list used to be completely dominated by Tesla. The other 2 being one from Ford, which is their Mustang, and the other from GM, being the Bolt. So it shows that there's a lot of competition here. Where there's a bigger issue, though, is in China, where Tesla isn't even the biggest seller of EVs at all anymore. There's another company, and you'll have to bear with me a second here. I think it's BET or something like that. I'm blanking out on that here for a second. And they've been competing very aggressively with Tesla with EVs that sell for less money and are manufactured in China, which there's definitely kind of a sense of, I guess you could say, national pride in China, where they like to buy locally manufactured vehicles. So as a result of that, you see that most of the EV growth in China right now is going to this other company, this local Chinese company. And there are other Chinese companies that are also trying to compete there, as well as some of the global competitors that Tesla has, including GM and Ford, but also Volkswagen, and who've been very aggressive in this area, and of course Hyundai, Kia, which we talked about earlier. The point of all this, though, is that right now China is the world's largest car market, more larger than the United States, and it's also growing much faster because there's still a lot of Chinese who either don't own a vehicle or only own one vehicle. The United States, though, you're talking about a much more mature market where people basically are buying new vehicles to replace old ones. So there's a lot more potential growth in China. And Tesla is very worried about the fact that it's kind of fallen behind these other competitors in China and is not keeping up with them. And to make matters even worse now, this Chinese company is starting to export vehicles to Europe, which is the world's second largest EV market after China. So it shows that Tesla is really facing some fundamental issues here. Now, everybody likes to look at, oh, the craziness going on in Tesla, and Elon Musk is always entertaining, to be sure. And frankly, a lot of the market valuation for Tesla, it was driven by this good story that Elon Musk was able to tell. He was an interesting character. He had a good story to tell. But at the fundamentals, uh, they were an early mover in this market, so they got that advantage. But that advantage does not last forever. And you can see it starting to whittle away as other competitors are coming into the market. Now, all of this is happening on top of a global slowdown in auto sales anyway. And particularly in the United States, I was just reading this morning, we've seen, I believe, an 8% drop in auto sales here from last year. So that's a very, very significant drop. That drop is due to a number of factors. They include production factors. They include some demand side factors with the interest rates going up, so cars become less affordable. There are still some issues with the silicon chips for some of the companies, particularly Toyota. And in fact, one interesting development here is that GM has once again moved ahead of Toyota in terms of having the largest sales of any company here in the United States. So that's kind of an interesting development for those of us here in the Motor City. But the bottom line is auto sales here in the United States are going down. They're going down in China. Europe, of course, they're still struggling under what's becoming an increasingly severe recession as a result of the invasion of Ukraine. And so auto sales are going down there as well. And then on top of that, Tesla's facing more competition. And you can see all this coming together to really create a situation where Tesla isn't having the free reign in the EV market the way they used to. And suddenly they're dealing with a much more competitive environment, which is causing them to actually offer incentives for the first time for their vehicles, both in China and here in the United States to some customers. And that eats away then at their profit margins, which of course then is going to impact the stock market. So interesting to watch Tesla, where you're in an industry that's really transitioning right now. Is Elon Musk, who's been credited as being this wizard, going to be able to rescue it? Frankly, I think the fundamentals are going to be more important than any single individual. But that being said, the question is how fast Tesla is going to fall and how far. Um, you know, we've seen where industries have transitioned like this. I don't think there are too many people out there right now carrying a BlackBerry smartphone or a Palm um, smartphone for that matter, or for that matter, using Netscape Navigator as their browser on their computers. So you can see where companies that are first movers in the market sometimes disappear. On the other hand, we've seen where Apple has succeeded. So the question is, which side of this gap are we going to see Tesla fall on? That's what's going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of years.
Yeah, take a poll in your life of how many people are asking Jeeves questions nowadays. It's going to be a pretty low number. We're joined by Michael Greiner on today's edition of the Megacast from Oakland University School of Business and Administration. More information on Oakland University programs can be found at oakland.edu. And as we talk about the impact of this shift to electric vehicles in the automobile industry, how that's even affecting some of the first in line for that in the automobile industry, such as Tesla. You think about the competitors and their momentum now against the giant that was and still for the time being is Tesla. They're really putting a lot of investment into electric vehicles as the way of the future. The Wall Street Journal recently released an article that said as of November, about $33 billion had been pledged in the U.S. to go toward new auto factory investment for electric vehicles. And as we've had some complaints in the past from people on both sides of the aisle politically about the loss of these factory jobs and these factory opportunities, now we're seeing those maybe coming back as electric vehicles are really becoming the way of the future in the automobile industry.
Yeah, they sure are. And that's the thing is none of these manufacturers want to get left behind. Kind of the way again that Netscape Navigator or BlackBerry did in their industries. So they're trying to really invest for the future right now. And a lot of them are very aware of the fact that the economy seems to be slowing down a little bit. We could be dealing with a little bit of a hiccup. Auto sales are down. But as a great example of how important it is to invest in this industry is the one bright spot in the US auto sales was that while we were dropping by about 8% in sales overall, the EV sales dramatically increased, almost doubling. So you're seeing a huge increase in EV sales. They went from, I think, about 3% of the market up to about 6% of the market right now. So although it's still a small slice of the auto market, it's the one that's growing. At a time that most of the rest of the market is declining. So, and that's only going to accelerate as some of these incentives come online that were included in the Inflation Reduction Act that Congress passed last year. As some of those come online, there's going to be even more incentive, not just to build EVs, but to build them here in the United States. Because one thing that's been talked about a little bit is the fact that the Inflation Reduction Act included some requirements that to benefit from these incentives, the vehicle that you buy has to be mostly built here in the United States. So buying something that's built in, say, China or Japan isn't going to be helpful. And so you're seeing a lot of investment here in the United States. And you mentioned the $33 billion figure. And just to give a little bit of context to that, that's in contrast to $9 billion in auto manufacturing facility construction just a few years ago in 2017. So it's a huge jump up, and it just shows that these companies are taking this as a very serious threat and a very serious opportunity at the same time that they need to be players in. One interesting side note about this, by the way, and this is again something of particular interest to those of us here in Michigan, is that a lot of these factories, the bulk of this investment, continues to be down in the South. Which is frustrating for many of us because, of course, much of the auto industry grew up here in the Midwest, and we'd like to see more of it happening here, and it still is. I mean, still a lot of the design and the leadership of it happens here, but much of the manufacturing, I think about 2/3 of the manufacturing, is being put down south. Why is that, you might ask? Well, the biggest issue, it looks like, is energy costs, and this is especially frustrating to those of us here in the Midwest for the fact that the reason that the energy costs in the South are so low is because of the fact that back during the Depression era, when we had the New Deal happening and there was the Tennessee Valley Authority, we built all this energy generating capacity down in the South that makes energy less expensive down the South than it is here by a pretty substantial margin. I mean, you're talking 20 to 25% cheaper. As a result of that, auto manufacturers say, hey, we want to locate here where our costs are going to be lower, but yet a lot of the basis for that, the Tennessee Valley Authority, a lot of that was paid for by taxpayers here in Michigan and other Midwestern states. So really, I think that there's need for us to call on legislators to address some of this inequality here and to essentially give us some of the benefit that we've given to the South to encourage the factories to go there rather than locating here in the Midwest.
Well, Michael, just another couple minutes with you before we'll need to move on today. A little bit behind time here on the show. There's another interesting report from the Wall Street Journal about the way that inflation is continuing to impact communities across the U.S. and in some ways is showing that inflation is hurting more the middle class, necessarily having a bigger impact on the middle class than it is on the lower class or those in the upper classes. uh, economically here in the U.S. At least. How is that the case? Because you would think with higher costs of these goods from inflation, that would particularly impact those that are in some of the lower socioeconomic classes, or especially those at or below the poverty line, more than those in the middle class.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is an interesting study. Frankly, I didn't find it quite as surprising as the Wall Street Journal did, but still an interesting story because the issue is how fast wages are growing. Inflation's not a problem if your wages are growing up faster than the wages. It's a problem only if your wages aren't keeping up with inflation. Well, as it turns out, most people in who are at the lower level of education, people who really, frankly, have lost out in some of the growth in wages over the past couple decades, really. Those people are the ones who have done the best job of keeping up with inflation, actually going with their wages increasing on average faster than inflation. On the other hand, middle class people, people who tend to be college graduates, we tend to be falling down relative to inflation. Our wages are not keeping up as much as inflation is increasing. I think the big issue there has to do with certain changes that you've seen in the workplace as a result of the COVID pandemic. You saw two things happen. Number one, you saw that people who are more well educated, that our jobs could be frequently done at home and done remotely. And there's definitely an interest among people who are more well educated to be able to take advantage of that and to be able to work at your computer and work via Zoom and that type of thing. And as a result of that, people are willing to sacrifice certain amount of their wages so they're able to work at home. And there is actually a challenge there where wages are being held down a little bit because people would rather work at home. And I can certainly understand that myself. By the same token, uh, a lot of the people who are in the non-college educated jobs, which tend to be in say manufacturing or in service industries, they tend to be jobs where you have to be there to do the job. There is no remote way that you can be a remote worker and say work at a fast food restaurant or be a waiter or be work in a manufacturing facility. Excuse me, that just isn't going to happen. So as a result, because of the fact now that there's this incredible demand as the economy has bounced back for service workers, they've been able to demand higher wages, which has increased the amount of money they're earning. At the same time that people in the middle class have seen it going down, as on average more of us are choosing to stay at home and in exchange accept lower wages. So kind of an interesting development there.
Well, Michael, we appreciate you joining us and giving us some more insight on where we're going, particularly in the automotive industry with electric vehicles, how it's currently impacting the industry, and having some widespread effects too in the factory manufacturing as well. And then, of course, how inflation continues to impact our economy. We'll have plenty of more discussions coming up with Michael in 2023. Thank you, as always, for joining us.
Sounds great. Take care, Tyler. Have a great week.